Yes, at this time I will turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Feature Friday for Juris Core Build Design Basics. My name is Dwayne Carey. I will be your guest host for the next 45-50 minutes as we cover the basics of build design in Juris. So this is not going to be a comprehensive 1-hour course on designing builds, but is hopefully enough to get you started if you have not had a chance to ever play around with the build designer in Juris. And more than likely, when you were implemented long ago and far away in Juris, we helped you design bills to get your bills out the door. But over time, you may want to change your bill designs or actually just create your own. And that's what we're going to hope to do today is get you pointed in that direction and you understand how the build designer works. So you can either customize your existing build designs or just start over from scratch and design your own bills. So with that, basically what we're going to be looking at today is this little circle of build design options. So a few of the topics I'm going to hit today are just the different properties available while looking at the build designer, and we'll see those, and we're not going to discuss every option, just time considerations, but what some of those options are and how they help you while you're designing your bills. Also take a look at what styles are and how you can use styles to make your bills look consistent as you're designing them. We'll look at a few different techniques in designing your bills. One was the lasso technique. That lasso technique is going to come in handy because as you rope those fields, we're going to be able to use that lasso technique to actually align our fields and make our bills look nice and professional. We'll take a look at some of the different subsections that are available in the Juris Build Designer. And one of the things we will be looking at constantly today is the Field Explorer, so we find the fields we want to input into our bills. So I think the best way to do this is just to jump over to a copy of Juris, which I will do now. Let's take a look at the Build Designer. So the Build Designer is found in Juris, and again we're looking at Juris Core. If I go to the Billing tab, there is a section here for Build Designer. I just double click to pull up the Build Designer. And again, you should have some already build designs in here. These are just my generic ones. I don't have any custom ones in this particular database. So you may have additional designs that were designed specifically for your firm, either by someone at Juris, one of our consultants, or someone previous at the firm who's been working with Juris may have designed some as well. So what you have the option here is a couple things. You could take an existing build design and just customize that existing build design. I can just go ahead, double click, open this up. It'll take me in the build designer, and I could just make tweaks to this existing build design. Now, if you've never used the build designer before, this might be a lot of information to process at once. So I'm not going to do it from here. I'm going to just show you some basics by creating a whole new build design from scratch. So I'm not going to save any changes. And just in case you decide to go this route and actually tweak an existing build design, your best bet is before you make any changes to this build design, especially if you're new to this process, before I make any changes here, I would go ahead and go up to the top, go to Form, and do a Save As, and save this under a new name. So Form, Save As, here's the existing layout and code. I would give it a new layout code. Like if this one was one I hadn't used, I'll just call it BF10. Basic format description, I might change that to add customized or whatever. Put in some kind of description to let you know what this bill code layout's displaying. The bill code layout can be up to 4 characters. So the bill layout customization is where you actually want to name this layout to give you more details on what you're going to be working on. So if you decide to tweak an existing layout, save it with a new code and description, click OK. That way, if you're new to this and you totally mess up the design or delete something accidentally or just have a hard time getting it back, not a big deal. You'll still have the original design you were starting with available to you, and then you'll also have this new basic format design that I can go back and tweak as I want. So my original design is still here unchanged. All I do is make a copy of it so I could tweak it. So that is the first step if you decide you want to just take an existing layout and tweak it on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and start out with a blank template. So it comes up, it'll ask you, do you want to use one of these as your starting points? But I'm going to go ahead and just start out with a blank build layout just to give you an idea how this works. And here it is. And here's the build designer in Juris. So over here on the left, we've got our layout explorer. This will allow me as I expand these sections out to jump to different areas of the bill quickly by just clicking on it, and it'll take me to that section of the bill layout. Now on this new bill I just created, there's nothing in here yet, so I really don't have to jump too much. I can actually just go ahead and go back to the top of the bill format, page header, and start from there. But as you start creating bills or you're working in an existing bill layout where it might be a larger informational to work with, you've already got fields and everything associated with it, this is a nice way to quickly jump where you need to be in this bill layout. And then down below that is your Field Explorer. This is where your fields are going to be located that you want to drag into Juris to pull data from the Juris database. And the fields you see in the Field Explorer is going to be dependent on the middle section, which is your actual bill layout. Depending on where you are in the bill layout, you will see different fields available. So right now I'm currently in the page header. It's the highlighted section. These are the fields that I can pull into the page header that have data within Juris. You'll see there's some of those custom fields from the matter bill and the client billing fields. If I jump to, for example, fee detail and I click on fee detail, that becomes highlighted. Now I have some different fields available to me. So your Field Explorer will vary depending on where you're located within the actual layout. Expense detail gives me expense codes. Fee detail gives me the fees billed, hours billed. So depending on where you are in the layout itself is going to determine which fields you actually see when you're going to design your bill. Then across the top, we just have our different buttons to access different things in the actual bill layout as necessary. New, open, save, etc., cut, copy, paste buttons, bold, italicize, underline buttons, our justifications. Also at the top, we're going to have some align buttons. I'm going to show you how to use these align buttons in just a little bit as we go through this bill design. And of course, this would tell me what font style I'm using. So this is your basic bill designer layout. You can jump to different areas of the layout here. Your fields will be available in the bottom left. Here's your actual layout front and center, and some of the different functionality here at the top in your toolbar. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to save. I'm going to create a new layout. I'm going to give it a code. Again, your code's up to 4 digits. So I'm going to call this new for today's purposes. This is a basic billing template. It's not going to be anything fancy, anything like that. Not only do I have the naming here, but you're also going to see over on the left, I've got some buttons. There's a properties button. If I click on that properties button, which is where I just was, I didn't mean to actually click OK out of that. And it's just telling me right now this layout has no fields. This is not an error. I know there's no fields. It's a blank field. I'm just starting out, so that's okay. Let me go back to that properties. With the properties is showing us the name and the layout. Page layout, this is where we can set up our margin. Styles. Styles can be very helpful when creating new bill layouts. This allows you to set up to 5 different settings to actually lay out your bill. So if I click on normal, here's my back color is white, my fore color is black. I can choose my font, italicize, bold, etc. And I can set up basically some styles that I want to use as I'm designing this bill. So for example, if I go into heading 2, I could change the colors. And I just click in the field I want to change. We'll see a little down arrow pops up and I can say, you know what? I want to use red for the foreground color when I'm designing here. I can change what font when I use this heading. So now I just choose the font I want to use. Let's do something that's actually readable, but not Arial. Where's my Calibre? Or we'll use Calibre for this one. Whether I want to italicize. False means it's not going to be in italics. Same with bold, but if I wanted this to be bold, then I change the false to true. And then underline, strike through. A lot of these terms should be familiar to you if you've used a word processor. And then here's the size of the font. So here I can make it a little bit larger. So basically what I'm setting up is a style that when I use this heading 2, it'll apply it to what I'm working on. So I don't have to worry about going back and trying to make those stylistic changes on my own throughout the entire bill. It'll use that style going forward. I can apply it to different areas of the bill as I'm going forward. So I can set up these different styles. And when I'm done, I just click OK. You've got some design options, display mode, I can actually, that's the nice thing about the bill designer. If you're familiar with the billing process, when you run a pre-bill, you can choose a template. When you run a bill, you can choose a template. You could just have one template for both, and while you're designing, you can say in certain areas, I want this to be for pre-bill only, or I just want this to be displayed for final bills only. So you'll have different display modes available to you as you're working, and I'll show you an example of that when I do a little bit more bill creation. So there's a few different things you can assign in the design options. You've got some AR settings. 30, 60, 90, 120 is normal, but if you use a different AR aging break, you could set that up. And then some just different layout options. And when you're done, click OK. And now we're back in our just basic bill design mode. So what I want to do is I just want to design a really quick and easy bill, show you how this works, show you some examples of things that help you design your own. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to this page header. In order to put something in this page header, I'm just going to move my mouse until it's that up and down arrow, left click, and then I'm going to drag the page header section down so I have some room to work. So this is now my page header. So in the page header, I want to include just a couple things. I want to go ahead and I want to include, we'll put the bill date in there. So I want to include the bill date in the page header. So we'll make sure I put that in there. So I go in, and I also want see current dates, and maybe we'll do some page numbering. We'll see. We'll see what I feel like doing when I get there. So first thing I'm going to do, I make sure I'm in the page header. It's the one that's highlighted in blue here. I can now go down and find my fields. And here in my fields, hey, there's the bill date field. So I can use the bill date field. Or maybe I actually want the current date. Sometimes I run my bills. Let's say today is the 19th of May, I'm just running behind. The bill date might actually be May 1st. So if I want the current date, then I can scroll down, and in one of these fields is the current date. So you got a couple different dates you can choose from. Do you want the bill date to appear on the header or the current date? So I'm going to just take that current date, left click, and I can just drag that field up here. So left click and drag, and then let go where I want it to appear. Now some of these fields might be fairly large, so again, we can go ahead and left click and drag these fields down to reduce their size. And now I've got the current date as part of my page header. Now if I wanted to call that out, earlier I showed you how to create a style. Well, if I want to apply that style to this field, I can right click in the field, and there's a properties option. And then in properties, I can go in and I can actually set everything up here that I like. I can set up my font, etc. If I go down to format, here for the date, I can actually choose, well, how do I want this date to look? And these are the different formats available. And as you click on these, it'll update to show you what your date's going to look like. So you can actually format your date the way you would like it to appear when it prints. I'm going to include the actual nice month printed out, etc. You can set up borders, which I'll go over in a little bit. Again, here's the font information, and then here's the properties itself. Down below is the style. This is where I could pick. I want to use that heading 2 style, and then apply it. Now when this prints, it should use that heading 2 style that I'd set up earlier. So that's where you can use styles to change how your fields are going to display. Otherwise, you could go in and just set it up manually yourself. Go to the font, etc., and set that up. But those styles will come in handy because it'll be quick and easy if you've already got your font, color, everything set to go. Just apply it to the field. Now I've got a little bit of a page header. I've got the current date in here. I also want to have the bill number, so I'm going to go down, find the bill number field. Again, just left click and drag it up and stick it where I would like it on here. Again, it's going to be kind of large. You'll see this one actually go ahead and write justifies for me. Of course, I can change that justification in the properties itself. I just got to move this around, left click and drag. Again, you can go in the properties and make any adjustments you want. Here's the alignment. It's aligning to the right of the field. So if you don't like the default alignment, you can change that in the properties. And this bill number, maybe I only want it to appear on that final bill. So what I can do If I scroll down, again, there's a lot of different fields here. I wish I could go over them all. I just don't have the time. But one of them is the display mode. Right now, display mode tells it, put this bill date in both the pre-bill and the bill for both. But if I click here again and hit the drop down, I can tell it there's only a bill number for the final bill, so only show it when I print a final bill. And then I can click OK. Now right now, it's just going to be a bill number. I may want to have some text over here that tells me this is a bill number so I know what that number is. I could go over here to the center section, and there's a group of buttons here in the center. One of them is just a selection. One of them allows you to choose data. Basically, I go down the Field Explorer. But this one allows me to add a label. So I could click on Label, make sure the button's depressed, go over here, and then I can just draw a box here. And then basically left-click and drag till you get a box, let go of the button. Now I can double-click in here and put in, this is going to be the bill number. And that way, that's the text that will actually print. And then I would have to tweak this a little bit to make sure it works and fit them together. So I could add just a field here that has the bill number, and I could type that in manually. The other thing you could do, again, delete that field. If I go into the properties here of that bill number field, and I go to the Format button, these are the ways I can have the number display. One of the options that you have is user-defined. And with user-defined, I just highlight it here, shows me what it would look like. If I click in this field, now I've got the blinking cursor, I can put in parentheses, bill number, and you'll notice now it's going to print the word bill number here. So include what you want printed in parentheses, end parentheses, put a space, and then put some number signs. I want up to maybe 5 digits in my bill number, so I put in 5 number signs. And now this is how it will print on my invoice, bill number and then the number. So I don't have to worry about getting 2 fields to match. I just use this one field to include the bill number in the text using the format and the user-defined field. Now, bill number should not be negative, so I don't have to worry about the negative side. But the bill number side, as long as I've got it here, I should be okay. Your bill number should only go up. And okay. So instead of creating 2 fields, I managed to do that all with one field called bill number. Now I could call that invoice number, whatever terminology you want to use, that's fine. Now if you want to get a little bit more creative, you could also include the pre-bill number because of course those numbers are generally different. So down here I could say I want to pull that pre-bill number in, do the same thing I just did, right click on it, go to the properties, change the formatting, use user-defined, and say this is the pre-bill number. Oops, don't forget the quotes. If you forget the quotes, it will not look right when it prints. And then again, just put in your number signs, how many digits you want. Click OK. Oops, got a little too hasty. Because I also want to go to the display mode, and I only want this one to display on pre-bills. And then click OK. Now collapse this down, and then drag this right on top of the bill number. So now, depending on when I use this template, if it's an actual final invoice or an actual bill, it'll print the field for bill number and print the correct bill number. If I'm using this template for pre-bills, instead of printing the bill number, it'll now print the pre-bill number. So instead of creating 2 separate templates, I can actually create both a pre-bill and a billing template in one, as long as I tell it when fields should print, whether they should print on both the pre-bill and the bill, or one or the other. So you have that kind of control. Now I've got my little page header. I can now collapse this down. You don't want to leave a lot of white space there because that's how much white space will print and your bill will look horrible. So collapse it down when you're done. And now I've got my little page header. Next, I click in the bill header section so I can create the bill header, and I want to include information. like maybe the firm. Now, if you're one of those firms that has your own logo with your address as a JPEG, as a little graphic image, you can include that on your bills. So maybe you've recently done that and your bills are just text, but you want to include that image, not a problem. Open up either your existing bill template or you can create a new one. And then just make sure that JPEG logo is somewhere, usually on a shared drive is best on the server if possible, but somewhere where it's shared out, just so make sure that wherever we print from, it should function correctly. And again, over here on in the center section, these little buttons, underneath the one that allows me to print a label, there's one that allows me to have an image available. So I click on the image button, I go into my pre-bill header, I left click and I draw my box by left clicking and dragging it out. Now I've got a box here for an image, I right click, I go to the properties here, and now I can point to where my picture is. So there's a line here under appearance called picture. Click on that line. Once you click, an ellipses button will appear, the little 3 dots. Click on that and then browse out to where your picture is. So I'll just use these little scales of justice here. Click on scales and that'll go ahead and put that image in that box. And I can also choose the picture alignment. It'll center it currently, but if I want it to fit the entire box, I can tell it, oops, not the alignment, I'm sorry, size mode. It's going to fit by the size of the clip, or I can stretch it to fill the box completely. So you can align it within the box. Let me change that back to center, to align it center, and then stretch it out to fill the box up. And again, display mode, I could have it just on final bills, pre-bills, or right now it's currently for both. And click OK, and there's my graphic. Hopefully you've got a logo with your name and address already there. And then you can use the little blue boxes to, of course, left-click and drag and drop and get this image to appear exactly where you want it to appear on your layout. So we can incorporate your graphics into these bill layouts if you have your company logo available to you. Just make sure it's where you can access it. Once that's set, you can then include any other information you would like to see in your actual firm field. For example, I might want my client information to appear here. So again, it's on the left-hand side. Look for my client information. So I'm going to look for the field client reporting name. There's the client reporting name. Left-click, drag it over here. And then under client reporting name, I want the billing address for the client. So I just find the billing address. I could do it line by line or just print the billing address complete and just pull in the entire billing address. Maybe stretch that out to make sure the billing address fits. Again, any other piece of information you want. Bill number, I could do the same thing I did previously on the page header. Pull that in as well. Right click on it, change the properties. Display mode. I'm worried about format at the moment. User defined. Put in the quotes. And now I can have the bill number print. Again, I probably want to go in there and change that also. Well, let's go ahead and do it while I'm here. Change it so it only prints on the final bill. Just change the behavior to display mode. Then I might want to show the bill through date when I'm billing them through. So I might drag that piece of information in. Again, we could change the properties on this and how we want the date to display. So these are different ways. So I may want to do it like this. And then in this case, I might want to go ahead and insert a label here, though, so they know what that date is. Oops. Unfortunately, my typing is a little off. There we go. And again, you may have to play around with these fields to get them lined up perfectly. as far as how far over do you go before it cuts off the date. So there might be some trial and error. That's normal. So now I can print the bill through date on here. So I've got a little matter header section, or I should say a bill header section. Now I want to tell them what matter they're being billed for. I can go to the matter header, drag that down. Over here, just grab the matter description. This will be a simple one to do. And then drag that over as well. And I go to my fee headers. All right, well, let's show them what we worked on. What are their fees for this current billing period? So now I just go to my fee header and I pull in those pieces of information and include a label to let them know where we are. This will be our professional services that we performed. Again, if I want to go in, if I already set up a style for that, I could apply that style. Otherwise, I can just go into the font and I can do some little changes to the font itself. That way make it stand out a little bit. So you can apply a style previously, or there are many times you just want to change one particular field and you can do it that way. Now I just got to include the labels for the different sections. So I'm going to put a label in there for the date we did the work. Oops, let me take caps lock off. Caps lock off. There we go. Pull in another label. We'll call this one the timekeeper who did the work. Third label. I know I'm doing this kind of haphazardly, but there's actually a reason behind why I'm doing it this way, which I'll show you in a moment. Description. And then just two more. Hours worked. And then finally, the fee total. All right, so basically what you normally want these to do is line up nicely. And I know I've got them really messed up, but I did that on purpose because I'm going to have Juris line these up for me. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to line these up horizontally. I take the one field that I want lined up and I put it where I want all the others to line up. So choose the one farthest to the right. So I'm choosing the fees column, trying to kind of fit that where I'd like it to be. Also, I can adjust the size of this. Now that I've got this fees column set and I want these to line up to it horizontally, now I use the lasso technique. Go over here or over here, I left click, and I drag a box around the fields I want to line up. Capture them all. I know which ones I've got because they'll be surrounded in those blue boxes that you see. Now that I've got those rounded up, now I can tell them to align to this fees box. Because again, it's always the one furthest to the right. So it's going to align to this, and that's where these alignment buttons come in. I can align them to the left, which would align it to the left side, which is not going to work. But when I hit this little drop down next to the Align Left button, I can also align them to the top of that fees box. So I click on Align Top, and boom, everybody lines up to the fees, and now I know they're perfectly horizontal. If I want to match that size, then here, not the second button, but the third button, make the same width. If I hit the drop down, I can make them the same height or do both. Well, I'm worried about the height because I adjusted the fees height, so I click on heights, and now they all match up to fees perfectly. So use the lasso technique to capture a bunch of fields, then use the alignment buttons to line them up perfectly. Now in this case, I may have to tweak a little bit and drag and drop these a little bit nicer to where I want them to appear. But there now is my fee header section. And then I can collapse that down. And that was just labels. So now in fee detail, I actually need to include the fields from Juris. Click in fee detail. Here are the fields available, and I just match them up. Date, date. Timekeeper. Well, timekeeper got a few different ways. I can do it by their initials, by their ID, by their name. Just going to keep it simple. I'm going to do it by the timekeeper initials. Description is work done, so that of course that's our narrative. So I drag the narrative over. And hours billed. Oops, let's knock that down a little bit. And then fees billed. And we'll collapse that down a bit and drag it into place. Now I can do the same thing, get fees billed exactly where I want it to be. Once I've got that set, use the lasso and then align. They should all be the same height, but let's just be safe. Now, that was horizontal. Vertical works the same way. And I can do it between sections. I just lasso. When you lasso vertically, the box on the bottom, the field on the bottom is what we're going to line up to. So it's going to line up to here, so I want to align them to the left side of that. Line left, and now they're lined up. So use the lasso technique to also do it. And line these up the way you'd like. Actually, I can collapse that timekeeper down a little bit. And that is how you can line them up vertically as well. This way you'll know everything should be nice and pretty when it prints. And then again, to eliminate extra white space between your different fees, shrink this back down when you're done. So we've got our fees there. And then to finish it up, we want to give them some totals. So now I just go into the fee footer section and I can put in, by stretching this out, what we billed in fees. So fee footer, fees billed. And again, I might want to include a label that lets my clients know this is the total fees. Again, lasso technique to line everything up nice. Oops. Let's make sure that's where I want it though. So that's what we're going to line up to. Actually, that I don't need to line up so much as I just want that to fit nicely with the fees billed. Actually, let's make them the same height. So there's our fee section. And of course, we can do our expense section the same way. I'm not going to go over the expense. It works the same exact way. So you would put in your fields, put in the expenses, and then total them up. At this point now I would normally have fees and expenses. So the last thing I want to do is create my bill footer. So I can do the same thing that I did before. So I can go in, we'll scroll down to bill footer, pull this section open. And now I just put in whatever I want to appear on the bottom of the bill. So again, I would insert some labels. I might have labels like billing summary. So this is a summary of your bill. And then what I want to include in this billing summary. I want to include things like the previous balance due. I want to include any payments received. I for E except after C. Label again. I can also do their total new fees for this bill. And I could also do label total new expenses. So basically whatever you want your client to see at the footer of their bill, that's what you'll include. I'm just going to include the label so they know what those numbers all are. And finally, we'll just end it with total balance due. And I just set everything up the way I'd like. In the same height. It's aligned to the left. And now I can actually go in and just drag and put these probably a little bit closer together than what I've got. Maybe right on top of each other. That's a little too close. So now you're just doing some cleanup work, getting your sections to look pretty. Now that I've got the labels, I can now go in here and actually match it out with the actual data fields that I want to see. So balance forward is the previous balance due. Drag that up. Payments received, payments applied. And you could match it up to the actual data fields if you wanted to, but I would normally pick the terms my clients are familiar with. Total fees billed is just the fees billed field. We have expenses billed. Total billed. And finally, just balance due. And again, we just have cleanup work at this point, making sure everything lines up nicely. Use drag and drop, or you can use the lasso technique. So this time, because they're all right, I'm going to apply them to the right because I want them to line up this way. Now, to make this stand out a little bit, for balance due, I could go into the properties and I can make some changes to it. It's like back style, for example. Right now it's transparent. But if I wanted that to stand out a little bit, I could make it a solid color and I could choose a color for it. Maybe I want to call it out in red. Oops, but that's still a little off. For color. Oh, why are you not doing this? Back style solid. I want the back color to be red. For color. Well, I don't have any text in there either, so I got to get some text set up. So we can basically just make this tweaked a little bit to make it look prettier and actually stand out. We can go to the borders. And at the top of the field, we could have the border have actually a solid. Right now, there is no top border, but I could tell, I have a solid line across the top. So that way, when you're looking at it, it'll actually show a line. Let me just change that back so we can actually see what's going on. So when this prints, there'll be a solid line across the top. And I could do the same thing over here with balance due if I wanted to. So just go to borders, border color, and then apply a border to the top. And that'll be able to show a border when we print. So it'll actually help stand out a little bit as we're going through. So we can change the individual fields at the bottom and make it look a little bit nicer. Did I tweak? Let's see. I didn't tweak back style settings for it. I already did, but I guess not. But we can make those changes, and we can make everything look a little bit nicer and have things call out as necessary. So it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but we technically now have a bill, the exception due to timing. I did not actually include an expenses section, but I would normally do the same thing, the expenses, that I did in the fees. And that would just make it a little bit easier for me to actually see what I'm working on. And again, you can just jump back to whatever section you want to work on. But those are some of the basics to get you going in the actual bill design of Juris. Some of the things to look for. So at this point, you'll hopefully be able to go ahead and create yourself a very, very basic bill. And then as you get more comfortable with it, be able to do more work and make it a little bit nicer in the long run. So with that, I believe there'll be some questions coming up if you have any. But before we get to the questions, just as a heads up, if you would like help with your designs and you don't want to work on your own, you can always work with the Juris Professional Services team. They can do phone-based or on-site consulting. They can help with Juris Suite reporting power packs, custom report writing. But anything you need, if you want some hands-on help, you can pay to have our Juris Professional Services team work with you. If you're looking just for more information on using Juris itself, you're new to the Juris product, we have some classes available at our LexisNexis University. We do some virtual training with Juris, and we can teach you things like billing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, etc. So if you need any more information or you want more learning, you can either work with one of our professional consultants with the Juris Professionals team, or you can check us out at LexisNexis University. So with that, we will go to any questions that may have popped up during the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Dwayne, for this very informative session. This does conclude the presentation portion of our webinar. So if you have any questions for Dwayne, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane, which is located on your webinar control panel. We'll give everybody a few minutes to type their questions if they have any. All right, I have a question for us. If there isn't a data field available, can we contact Juris to make one for us?
It depends on the field. If it's a custom field in the database that you have, I'm hoping this is Juris, I'm not thinking one of our other applications that I work with. I believe the professional services team can link additional fields into the billing layout. So if there is a field not available, if I'm not mistaken, we can get it into the bill layout. I don't know if there's a charge for that. You'd have to check with either, if you have a tech support contract in place, you can give tech support a quick call and they can point you in the right direction, whether there's a cost or not. But if I am not mistaken, if there's a field you need that's not showing up in the bill layout, but the data exists in Juris, they can add it to your layout.
Great. So we'll wait a couple more minutes and see if anybody has any questions they would like to type to us before we stop the recording. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, so that concludes today's webinar, and I would like to thank Dwayne very much once again for his expert advice on today's topic, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar.